Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real Scoop Live with Stacey and the boys being Brett and Matt. Today, we're going to talk to you about keeping your winter blue. And if you know, you know. If you don't know, then clearly you're not from a state in the Northeast portion of the country. In layman's terms, we're going to talk about preparing your pool for not being used during the off season or closing it completely for winter. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the guys and they're going to talk to you all about that.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
All right,
Thanks for being here on RSL Live.
We're going to talk winter today because it's everyone's light at the end of their tunnel. Because usually when you pull the cover, that starts the downtime when you can actually collect yourself and figure out what happened to your entire year. We share in that. What we'd like to talk is just a brief overview of winterization, the process. We're going to talk a little bit about water balance, chemical processes, what they do in colder water, and then Matt's going to go over traditional winterization chemicals versus some other different flavors that are out there that might be fun to try. So overall, brief overview of winterization. Get your water balanced and in good shape. Have it looking pretty, because if you close the pool when it's green, you're going to open and it's going to be even greener than it was when you pulled the cover, if you have a cover. If you don't have a cover, you should probably look into getting one, because it actually does a lot to protect the surfaces of the pool, especially if you've got plaster, and just keep all that gunk out of there so you don't have to work harder to clean it up later. Dropping water levels if you have to do it. Again, make sure water table so you don't pop your pool out over the winter time. Let's talk about popping lines. You want to make sure you get all the water out of your lines. If you are actually in a climate where you winterize fully, blow all the water out of the lines, chase it with just a little bit of antifreeze. You don't have to go too crazy. That's really more of an insurance policy to make sure that you don't have freeze damage over the winter time. Plug your lines up so that water, raising water in the pool from rains or snows or anything like that doesn't get back into the lines and cause further freeze damage.
Hey, Brett, I have a question. Sorry to interrupt you. Are there differences between the antifreezes that people use and that are available each year?
There are. There's a couple different flavors out there. There's actually, I'll start with one that more regionally popular. There's saline-based antifreeze, which is essentially just a hyper-saturated solution of salt water. Salt water doesn't freeze, so that generally will just turn into kind of like a slushy type material inside the lines, but it won't freeze. Then there's traditional antifreeze, which would be like your pool antifreeze, which is chemically pretty similar to RV antifreeze, which is a combination of alcohol and propylene glycol that actually prevents the freeze. The alcohol just doesn't freeze, so that it will turn into sort of like a slushy, and then the propylene glycol, it doesn't allow to freeze either. Oddly enough, depending on the blend or the mix, your antifreeze can smell kind of like birthday cake. That's just from what I've seen out there. So if you're out there blowing lines and you get a blast of what smells like birthday cake, might be your antifreeze. So enjoy that.
Okay, so just a follow-up question to that. So essentially, you're talking about either hyper salted water, which is no big deal in the spring. You have alcohol, which is no big deal in the spring. But what does propylene glycol do?
Propylene glycol in excess, when you pull the plugs and actually start running your system the following year, you're never going to get all of that out before you start up. So some of that antifreeze is going to end up in the water. Now you think, okay, maybe it's a gallon or so in a 20,000 gallon pool. It's a drop in the bucket, but all those little drops in the bucket add up and add to chlorine demand. So it can cause you to have to add a boatload of chlorine to burn out the propylene glycol from the water when you go to start your pool up the next year. Or you can use certain types of products to digest the propylene glycol so that you don't have to have as much chlorine used.
You mean like API's Enzyme Pro?
That would be one of them, yes.
Now available in the court.
That's right, which is great for winterization.
Yes, it is.
And for opening.
Yes.
A little shameless plug there.
Hey, all right.
Gotta get them in where you can.
Hey. Few and far between, brother.
We mentioned I mentioned earlier getting your water balance right at before you close, and that's actually a lot more important than people think. If you look at the saturation index, a factor that people don't pay a lot of attention to is temperature. As the temperature drops, it can actually make your pool water more aggressive. So if you're starting out with aggressive water, it gets colder and then your water gets even more aggressive. That could be really detrimental to your plaster, vinyl, any pool surfaces that the water's touching. And the winter can actually be some of the most damaging time for pool surfaces, not just for freeze damage. If the water chemistry's off, it's sitting there, not moving around a whole lot for half the year, just eating into your pool surfaces.
That's not to mention the LSI, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of taking part of that into consideration, because if you're not balanced and you're aggressive, it's going crazy. If you're scale forming, that's not as big a concern in the wintertime, because you can generally deal with that as the water gets warmer, and it'll absorb a lot of the stuff that settles out over the wintertime, once the water's ready to accept more stuff back into it. So balance is definitely important at the end of the season. So keep it clean and keep it balanced when you're closing, and it's going to directly impact how successful and quick your openings are. If we're talking
and if you want to do just like a formula, if you do the LSI and you think about how the readings of your pool when you're closing that pool, well, do the same LSI calculation, but do it at 45 degrees.
And that'll give you a rough approximation
degrees.
of where your balance is going to be. Because really, a lot of the other factors aren't going to change, because you're not adding as much to the pool if you're covered as you do typically during the season. It's just a static body of water at that point. No, that's a really good point. Calcium is a fun little weird chemical. It's actually a metal, and it's one of the weirdest ones that generally, if you let's talk about this in the comparison of like a cup of coffee. If you've got a warm cup of coffee and you dissolve sugar in it, it dissolves pretty readily. If you've got a cold iced coffee and you put sugar in it, it usually takes a heck of a lot longer for the sugar to dissolve in your iced coffee than it does in the warm coffee. And that's just because warmer water generally is able to dissolve things into it more readily. Calcium's the weird one-off that's backwards. Calcium actually dissolves better in cold water versus hot water. Is why it's actually really good if you're going to shock at the start of the season. It's really good. You can use Cal Hypo to shock at the start of the season, because it readily absorbs the calcium a heck of a lot easier than it does during the summertime. So you don't get the potential for clouding like you do, or any other issue like that. Plus, generally after the season, when it's cold and the water's still colder, your balance might be a little on the aggressive side. So a little bit of extra calcium can help pad those numbers and make the balance a little bit better after the long winter. So that's pretty much the really quick watered down overview of winterization in a climate where you would actually close down everything for a pool. In other areas, like where Matt is in Texas, they may not close it down fully. They may not swim in it, but I'll let him talk a little bit more about those.
All right. So I'm in Central Texas. Stacey is in the East Coast of Florida. Down through there, the rigors of the traditional things that you have to do in the height of summer are relaxed a lot. So you have chlorine that lasts longer because the sun's not beating down on it. There's not as many things that are sprouting. There's typically in the winters, the drier seasons. Unlike this last year, this is the fall of 21, or not quite the fall. This is the August of 21 that we're doing this, but we're going to be putting this out in September. So if you think about that, you have times when you have hotter months in September. August, September, typically in Central Texas are super hot. And then October starts to get a little bit less, November even less, and then December, January, February, you're not really doing a lot of swimming or even a lot of tinkering with the pool, because there's just not a lot to do. It's kind of like your lawn. Typically there's a time in the fall where you can mow your lawn for the last time and you get a reprieve of 4 or 5 months, depending where you're at in the world. So unlike this last February in Texas, where we had 2 weeks of at zero or below, we've never really done any kind of winterizing, at least anywhere outside of the panhandle. So in that sense, you're looking at maintaining the proper water balance, maintaining effective chlorine. So you still want your chlorine residual between the 1 and the 3 when your pool is open, but it's going to take traditionally less chlorine to do that. So You'll still have to check the pH, the alkalinity, and make sure the chlorine is in there. But other than that, there's really not much to do. Now, here's the one thing that a lot of people don't consider. When you have a freeze warning, and your pool's not closed, or if you know that that the air temperature is gonna be lower for an extended period of time, you need to run your pump during that time, because running water is harder to freeze than stagnant water. And so if you want to make sure that you don't have any issues with pipe bursting, you want to make sure that your pump is on. So that's just one of those things to think about. Now, let's transition from pools that are open during the winter months to pools that get closed during the winter months. Brett had a very, very good summary of the things that you need to look out for. If you are a dealer or a service company, you have done a lot over the course of the years that you've been in the industry for winterizing. Most of the time, traditionally, people are using the winter kits. The traditional winter kit, depending on which one you get, would typically have a non-chlorine shock in it. It would have a staining scale in it, and then maybe a lowbrow algicide, which typically is normally an algistat, meaning it's a 10, 20, or a 40. Remember that the 10, 20s, and 40s are not quaternary compounds, or are not polyquats, they're quaternary compounds. Those can foam, but remember that those are also algistats. So they're meant to keep your algae from being able to establish a foothold. So those are what's typically in a kit, right? A closing kit. There are other ones that are out there that will be like a cold water enzyme mixed with a non-phosphate sequestrant, non-phosphate-based sequestrant. Then you can add whatever kind of shock that you want. The problem with some of those, specifically enzymes and even staining scale products, is that if you add those in with cal hypo or liquid chlorine or anything where you would raise the chlorine level to like break point or even 8, 10, 12 parts per million, that what you're doing is you're pitting two different types of products together. So if you're going to do something like that, either put them in at different points, or don't use the chlorine-based shock, but use a non-chlorine-based shock. So that way, they don't fight each other. They stay in there for a longer period of time. They provide more protection. That's very important. Now, here's the other part about winterizing. We all have those people that the Tuesday after Labor Day, they want to close their pool. And they do that for certain reasons. Maybe they grew up knowing that Memorial Day to Labor Day is the swim season, and after that, it's not the swim season. Maybe it's the same type of people that say, well, you can't wear white after Labor Day. That's like an old-fashioned thing. But if you close on the week after Labor Day and you have a month and a half of water temperature at 85, and then those are typically people that don't want to open until right before Memorial Day, you have a lot to consider, because that water is going to be wanting to grow algae, and there's algae spores in it that haven't been treated, or for whatever reason the chlorine or the products that you put in there aren't being efficient because your pH is real high, your pH is real low, or whatever. You're going to have a green pool. That's just the way it is, So whenever it's like that, you always want to promote closing later. Think about this. If you're a homeowner, you spent $50 to $80 to $100,000 on a pool. Do you really want it covered? It's not as beautiful as it is when it's uncovered. Uncovered pools are you just want to be around them. They're just so nice. Covered pools are like, meh. It's kind of like, it's winter already. Yeah. It's like living in Seattle. It's raining all the time. Whoa. And maybe you're not. No, I'm just kidding.
Sharp darts.
But there's a lot of rain in Seattle, right? So you have to be able to put up with the rain in order to enjoy yourself in Seattle. Now, the sunny days are awesome, but that's what I'm talking about, is that you look out there and you're like, ho hum. Even though you spent $80,000 on this super awesome backyard, it's not as enjoyable to be out there anymore, right? So you always want to close late and open early. If you can do that, then everything works better during the season. Seriously, you're not taking a week of 10 days to get rid of all the stuff that's in the pool and everything else. Now, if you've heard recently about how the winterizing kits this year aren't as available as they have been in past years, There are a lot of people that will make up their own winterizing kits. We would recommend that you use the products that you have in the store that have anything to do with enzymes or non-chlorine shock or low-level shock like dichlor, which I don't think is really available. Non-chlorine shock, I don't think is really available this year that well. But all those things that you have in stock that you want to get rid of so you don't have a lot of inventory that you're carrying over to the next season is what you want to use. In the event that you don't have enough, Easy Pool, again, it's not meant to be a shameless plug. It's not even really meant to be this isn't a selling vlog. But when you're talking about winterizing, the easiest way to do something to fix this issue would be to use something like Easy Pool. Easy Pool has a long life algicide, a non-phosphate sequestrant, it has a clarifier, it has balance management in it, and it has a very long life oxidizer that's non-chlorine that will actually help your pool to stay full of active oxygen. So that way, if anything gets in there, it can take care of it. If you're on one of our other episodes, we talked about ammonia, we talked about nitrates, we talked about chlorine demand, we talked about stabilizer. Well, this works with all of that. So that is just an easy
all of
way
the
to
things
do it.
that Matt mentioned earlier about what goes into a traditional winterization kit, like a stain and scale, a non-chlorine shock, balancers. Oddly enough, they're all in one bucket, which makes it a heck of a lot nicer. I'm speaking from experience because even before I worked for API, I've been winterizing several pools and have used Easy Pool in almost all of them. And wow, the performance is actually pretty darn good. My sister flat out told me if I ever try to close her pool with anything else, she will not be happy with me at Christmas time. So,
all right. So with that, I think that we pretty much covered that. Is there anything else that you guys want to add?
Stacey, talk about winter in Ohio.
Winter in Ohio is horrible, which is why I no longer live there.
Fair enough.
I will say, if you're a dealer listening to this and you are using Easy Pool in your retail store for consumers who want to close, we have marketing materials for that. So reach out to us and we'll get you the free stuff. We've got labels that go on top of the 5-pound pails. There's wall graphics and flyers if you need them. You can request that by calling the customer experience hotline. That number is 877-274-7261, or you can email me. It's customersupport@apiwater.com. Either way, and you can order that through the mobile app as well. So there's a lot of ways for you to contact us, whatever works the best for you. Even if you're on Instagram or Facebook, we're there as well. If you follow us there, send a message there. There's a million ways that you can reach us, and any of them are okay, whatever works the best for you guys.
Yeah, text us. Did you say that?
I forgot about that. You can text us too. You can something to keep in mind. You can text us on the hotline on the 877-274-7261 number. However, that line, the software that we use to make that textable, doesn't accept photos. So if you try to send me a picture of a green pool to say what the heck is going on with this pool, I'm not going to be able to see it. So those you do need to email your pictures. Or send them to me through social media. I can get them that way. But if you just want to text me something in words, you can do that through the text app. Absolutely.
Right. So you can always tag us on social media at API Water Care.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, let's call this winterizing over.
Keep the blues, guys.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.